Hello, and welcome to today's lesson where we're going to go one step beyond with our two-column proofs. In our last lesson, what we did is we used the two-column proof to prove that the triangles were congruent. And today we're going to go one step further and we're going to prove that parts of the triangles are congruent. Okay, now, this is a term that you're definitely going to want to get used to. It's something that we use in all of our proofs and all of our congruent statements, and we really kind of shrink it down. Okay, so now, corresponding parts of congruent triangles. If two triangles are congruent, then we know that the corresponding parts of those triangles are congruent. And what we have is we have this acronym to help us as we go through the work. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so we have our acronym CPCTC. Okay, just remember the C is first, third, and 5 letters, and then you just need the PT, parts and triangles. So corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, and we're going to use this and go through a couple of two-column proofs here to show. So now, remember the rules of setting up your proofs. Always start with what you're given and know that you're trying to prove something in the end. Okay, so what we're trying to prove is we're trying to prove the statement that SG is a congruent or same length as IA. Okay, so we have to see what are the triangles that give us those congruent pieces. Now, we're given a lot of information here that we're going to be able to put into our diagram and find our pieces. Okay, we're told that angle S is congruent to angle I. Okay, that is a given statement. Okay, so we're told that this angle is congruent to this angle. Okay, so we know right now we already have an angle pair for that. We're told that angle G is congruent to angle A. Okay, that's given. And that's another pair of angles. Okay, so angle G is congruent to angle A. Okay, so we can kind of see the two triangles that we're working with here. Okay, our two triangles that we're working with are this triangle here. Okay, triangle AIT. And then our second triangle is triangle AGST. Okay, and we already have two pairs of angles, so we're in really good shape there. Okay, we're also told, and this is another piece of given information, okay, that T is the midpoint of SI. And that's given. Now, that doesn't give us anything initially, but if we're told that T is a midpoint, now we know that IT is congruent to ST. Okay, and what's the reason? Why do we know that? Okay, once again, this is one of our most common reasons for a situation is the definition of a midpoint. Okay, so the definition of the midpoint tells us that this IT length and the ST length are the same. Okay, so now that gives us an S. So if we work around our triangles, do we have enough to build a congruent statement about these two triangles? So if I look at what I have, I've got an angle, and a side. And remember, you can't skip over more than one piece. So from angle to angle, I'm skipping over one side, which is okay. And then from this angle to this side, they're connected. So I'm not skipping over anything. Okay, so I do have enough for a congruent statement, and it would be angle, angle, side congruence. And now I just need to name the two triangles that are congruent. Okay, so it's triangle AIT is congruent to, and we need to make sure we're naming it in the proper order, GST. Okay, so now we've got our triangles congruent. We're ready to finish this up. And if we notice in the naming of them, here is our AI that we were looking for. Here is our GS. Now the order is flipped, but it is the same pieces. It's in the same part. So now our reason for this, and it's always the end justification when you're looking at pieces, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so we always finish up with that CPCTC. Okay, so remember, when we start out our proofs, you always want to start out with your given information. You want to finish the last entry with what you're trying to prove. Okay, so we know that these pieces are given. And in this case, since we're talking about parts, we always have to finish with CPCTC, and then it's just filling in a couple pieces in the middle. So notice there's not a lot of work that you have to do here. You have to figure out how you can make the triangles congruent. Is there any missing information? But a lot of this is set up for you overall. Okay, so let's look at one more of these. Okay, once again, what we're trying to prove is we're trying to prove that two side lengths are congruent. Okay, so we're trying to prove that AD is congruent to BC. So that is our very last entry. And the reason, if we can get there, is going to be CPCTC. Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so I have that filled in. Okay, now, we always start off with the same thing. What are the pieces that were given in the diagram? Okay, now, let's remember, what are we trying to prove? We're trying to prove that this length is congruent to this length. Okay, so what we need to do is work with, we've got two triangles here, a top and bottom triangle. Okay, but what are we given? Okay, we are given that angle A is congruent to angle B. Okay, we know that based on the tick marks. Okay, so that's given to us in the diagram, and that gives us an angle pair for our two triangles. We're also told that the length CM is congruent to the length DM. Okay, that is given to us. Okay, and that is a side pair. So we've got an angle pair, we have a side pair, that's all that's given to us. Okay, now, how can we get the one extra piece that we need for a congruent statement? Okay, it would be nice if we were told that the CB and AD were parallel, because if they were parallel, I could have an alternate interior pair with C and D, which would be nice, but we don't have that. Okay, so we can't do anything there. Okay, we don't have any overlapping sides. We don't have any overlapping angles, but we do have one type of angle that we know is always congruent, and that is the vertical pair of angles. Okay, so we have a second set of angles that we know are congruent. So now we just need to list their names, and we can't call them M. We have to name them with 3 letters. So angle CMD is congruent to angle, and we have to make sure that we're matching the pieces up properly, angle DMA. Okay, we have to make sure, like I said, we're matching the pieces correctly. And it's not CMD, sorry, it's CMB. Apologize for that. So we've got CMB starting at the C, going through the 2 tick mark side, going to the 1 tick mark angle at B. So when we're on the bottom, we have to do the same thing. We have to start at D, go through the 2 tick mark side, and go to the 1 tick mark angle. Now the reason for that is it is a vertical pair of angles. So now we know that we have an angle situation. Now we want to be careful. This might not be ASA. It could be AAS. Okay, and we have to always look and see, how do we know that these 2 triangles, and I'm just going to use the exact same names here, triangle CMB, how do we know that that triangle is congruent to triangle DMA? Okay, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at where are the pieces that we're given. Okay, so once again, we've got an angle, and a side. Okay, so if I go this way around the triangle, I've got an angle and a side, but now I'm skipping an angle, skipping a side to get to this angle. I can't do that. Okay, so I can't go in that direction to name this triangle, but I can go side, angle, and to this angle because I'm only skipping one side. Okay, so the reason that these are congruent is not ASA, but it's SAA or AAS. Okay, so either one of those. And then we always finish up with the same piece. Congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so now, once again, notice the part here. Okay, there's not a lot of work that you have to do. Okay, the givens are there for you. What you're trying to prove is given to you, and we know the reason why it would work. Okay, so what you have to do is just fill in the missing pieces. Okay, how can you find that extra piece to get you to your congruent statement? What congruent statement did you use? And then the proof finishes up for you after that. Okay, so that concludes our lesson for today. Good luck on your homework. Thanks.